How can we lay the foundations for meaningful change?
There used to be what they talked about an implementation cycle. They've changed the wording on it slightly to an implementation process, which I think is indicative of the fact that we need to see this as an ongoing process and not once around the cycle and we're done. I think that's an important sort of cog in the mechanism of making sure that change remains sustained. Um, One of the things I think schools struggle with, certainly in my experience, more than almost anything else, if you take money out of the equation, is time. And change is often sparked or prompted by an external factor, somebody coming in, whether that's Ofsted or a trust school improvement team or a head teacher or governors, whatever it might be, who identify a an issue. Um, Often that's data led, but not always. And there then becomes a bit of a time driven um, need to enact change quickly. And in my experience, that means that change isn't always delivered in the best way that it possibly could be. So I think that the first thing to understand about delivering sustainable changes that you need to factor in more time than you would think. A bit like on grand designs when everybody thinks they're going to build the house in 12 months and then you see them 2 years later living in a caravan at Christmas. You need time, and it will take longer than you think.
How can we ensure that the changes we make, the improvements we make, are sustained?
Well, once we know what the problem is and we've set the scene, we know we've got a really good picture objectively of where we are as a school right now. And this is the sort of work that I do when I work with schools as a school development lead. That whole first visit, which might be a full day, is spent really trying to understand the school context. And I can't do all of that in a day either. I'm working with leaders to make sure that work continues after I leave. Once that's done, and you're relatively clear on what the problem really is, then the next stage really is the prepare phase, and that is something that often gets brushed over as well. But that is your opportunity to work with other stakeholders and mostly teachers, to be honest, to make sure that you've got that buy-in from them that this is the right way forward. Because we all know that in schools, things can change quite quickly, and you can get an email one night saying that I want something done differently as of next week or whatever. And that can be frustrating. I understand that. I've been there. I feel it. So preparing the ground with staff as well is equally important. And so to do that, you need to be absolutely clear on why you are doing what you are doing, what the next step is, and to make sure that you're doing the right thing and to be able to have that clarity. I think it's important to conduct some research into how other schools in similar settings might have approached this particular problem, because
What pitfalls should we avoid when making changes in school, and without them just being the opposite of the of the implementation process?
yeah, yeah. The biggest pitfall that I see, and I'm trying really hard not to say the obvious things that we've just talked about, I suppose. The biggest pitfalls are not allowing things to bed in and to decide after sometimes less than a term that actually there's two things here. One is it really may not be working for you. It really may not be working in your setting, and I think it is important to acknowledge that if that's the case. If it really so, a school I was working with recently, they wanted to do teaching for mastery. They are not currently in the place to implement that as things stand at the moment. And to force that on them would be completely the wrong approach. It would do more harm than good. Um, and and so you might say, there's all this research that shows that this is the best way forward, but actually, in their context, where they are staff wise, resource wise, time wise, capacity, mental, emotional, everything else. We're working with people, and you need to respect that and bear that in mind, I think. And so I think sometimes just ploughing on regardless of what the feedback is can be really detrimental to implementing change that is truly going to be sustainable. So that's definitely one of those things, is not listening to the feedback and not, I suppose, having preconceived ideas. So that's what happens quite often. And you'll know, Kieran, maths hubs, they have preconceived ideas of how maths should be taught, because that's what they're all about. But I think most most mastery specialists that you work with will also be able to recognize contextual circumstances, and actually, yes, this is the gold standard, but this is where we are at the moment on a particular journey.